Thank you very much. It's refreshing because I'm actually coming from the other side, the conservation side, and it has been a very refreshing to hear the business side of what's going on, and I think there are very important lessons for us to learn as well as for the business area. If I can have the second slide straight off. What I want to talk today very briefly is give you an overview of well, let me start. I can start the process. An overview of some of the issues that the conservation arena has been looking at. And one of the things we recognize is that really society is more than just conservation. It's businesses, it's communities, it's livelihoods. And my discussion today is really trying to bring some focus from our perspective of what are ecosystem services. And I think, as we've heard today, there are many examples of how that really works in a very practical way. So why should you care? And I think I really don't need to spend any time because that was answered in the previous presentations. Some of our thinking, which I think mirrors very much what you've been discussing today. And then finally, just a very quick example of some of the actions that we are taking. And one of these is Mangroves for the Future, which is a multi-partner initiative that tries to bring all these different stakeholders together to address issues in coastal ecosystems. If we make a, what are ecosystem services? And I think the word ecosystem tends to actually get a lot of people very fuzzed because it's looked at a very biological or a technical term. And it's really trying to bring out the actual elements of both life in terms of people, biology, plants, animals, as well as the other social and environmental and even the human elements that. The benefits that ecosystems provides really ranges right up from mountains into the coastal areas. They really deal with some of the very basic things that we need: food, fiber, climate regulation, and you can think of those in terms of regulation and provisional services, which we'll discuss. Next slide, please. And really, these fall in two basic categories: the things that we provide for food, water, raw materials, plants, and fungi, and then the regulatory services that we think of, such as things as pollination of crops, prevention of soil erosion, water purification, and you can even think of the climate issues and climate change issues we currently discuss. Ecosystems and businesses interact right across multiple different types of systems. I mean, clearly the food and agriculture industry is predominant. It affects the tourism and hospitality sector. Business and insurance, it makes a very big, important effect. And then finally, transport, energy, and infrastructure. And these are just very simple examples that I think, as you said, you're all aware of. In the case of Thailand, in 2006, it's over $3,000 million worth of exports of seafood products. That's quite substantial when you think about it, just from 3 or 4 main areas: shrimp, fish, and squid. Similarly, the wood furniture exports that go out, I mean, these are relatively old figures from Thailand, $700 million. It's quite substantial because each of these depend on basic biological products. That's the basis of generating this. And then finally, the human element. 42% of Thailand's labor force is in the agriculture sector. Those are your customers. They are the people who actually produce. They are dependent on biodiversity. And we shouldn't lose sight of that fact. So ecosystems, the message here is really very much part of our life, our livelihoods, and actually our models. If any of you have had the opportunity to look at the Millennium Ecosystem Assessment, and I would send you to the website, it was a very thorough assessment of the state of the ecosystem. And I think we had a very provocative and interesting discussion about the state of our world in the earlier sessions. The bottom line is that everything is going down. We are on that slippery slope, and there's no question about it. And there is a real need to do something about this. And what we've been talking about is how, as from a conservation and management and nature-based, how can we start moving in this direction in a more practical, pragmatic way. Why should businesses care? Next slide, please. I really don't think I should spend any time here because I think we've heard really very practical examples from these earlier presentations today. But very simply, there are three basic reasons. Really, a lot of the services that we've generated and benefited from have been so far free, but that's changing. And the climate, carbon market are all examples of how we're actually starting to pay for that. Secondly, that there is going to be a cascading effect of these impacts. And it's going to go right down to the customers, the policies, and the availability of finance and insurance. We've seen that, for example, in Florida in relation to the risk of insurance and people not getting home insurance. And then finally, as you've seen today, many examples of new business opportunities. Please. I think you can slip to these two slides because I'm actually talking to a converted audience here. So if you can, but the bottom line is that we do need to move forward, and there are really very good examples. And the next point is that we really need to broadcast and use those examples to encourage other sectors and societies of our stakeholders to move forward. So three ways that we see moving forward, and if I can have the next slide, please, really is to identify and understand ecosystem services. And I think this goes to an element that was discussed in many of your presentations earlier, which is essentially do those assessments to understand what your footprint is and what it is that you've using, and understand the costs and opportunities, the baselines, as we see. And then secondly, to actually recognize that, and I think the last example was a really very good example where there had been a very thorough assessment of the different elements in the process of where those resources are being used in terms of energy and how you can actually look at to impact that.